oil and gas sector is dead. The manufacturing sector is dead. The non-energy sector is dead. After the fiasco with the Auditor General earlier this year, which remains unresolved, the country has no faith, I certainly have none, no trust, no confidence in any of the data the minister presented today. As citizens, we know the reality on the ground. No police cars, no medicine hospitals, no books for children, no water in taps, no food on our tables, no jobs. And on top of all of that, $3 billion remains unaccounted for, in addition to many other billions which we share. So this is my first response to the minister's 2024-25 budget statement. This is the 10th chapter. It is a masterpiece of misery. A decade of destruction. That decade completed today as we go into the new budget. We have these many hours of a decade of destruction. We have a PNM 10-year legacy of banditry, broken promises, and betrayal. Of course, this is a prelude to my official response on Friday, where I'll get into some more details. When the government came into office in 2015, they inherited the largest economy in our history, the largest stock of foreign reserves, and record high employment, which my government had produced. Today, nearly a decade later, they have brought us to near ruin, destruction, and chaos. This 10th budget presented by the government could not improve the country after spending over half $500 billion for the past 9 years. Only fools, eat-a-food fake elites, pseudo-intellectuals, and PNM true believers will think this additional almost $60 billion will create any improvement. Again, it's a repeat of the blame of the partnership government. Blame the Ukraine war, blame COVID, and now they've gone from blaming Kamala to blaming Panama, blaming the Red Sea. Minister Imbert and his colleagues need to stop blaming everyone else. They are to blame. The budget was titled Steadfast and Resolute, Forging Pathways to Prosperity. However, the economic indicators are in steadfast decline since 2015 because of the resolute incompetence. The minister mentioned no pathways to long-term prosperity, besides waiting for gas production and prices to rebound. 9 years and nothing. Now going into the 10th year, the finance minister presented a budget of almost $60 billion. This is incidentally, as I said before, on the heels of a headline in Saturday's Express, where the national tongue crier, Mr. Rowley, tells the country to hold strain and ban our bellies for hard times until 2027. The irony of that is this budget's almost $60 billion is adding to over the $530 billion that the government has wasted in the past 9 years. Mr. Rowley has been crying and evoking fears about difficult times ahead since 2015, but doing nothing to improve the situation. Half the Point Lisa's industrial estate is shut down. We are facing increased electricity prices because of Mr. Rowley's failed Houston gas price negotiations, where he and Minister Young outsmarted themselves. The minister confirmed today that they have no plan for increased revenue generation, but are prepared to wait for increased gas supply in 2027. While the minister speaks of minimal growth in the last 3 years, the minister did not mention that this minimal growth is driven by very heavy government borrowings and withdrawals from the country's savings and does not come from any sustainable activity. Over $89 billion borrowed, and also another $17 billion was withdrawn from the HSF on 10 occasions, not once, no, 10 times withdrawals from our savings fund, the HSS. The minister has not mentioned, when he's talking about the country growing and everything is booming and growth, that this economy is 20% smaller today than it was when we left government in 2015. At that time, 1.7 billion, 10 times more than they are today. In 9 years, this government increased debt by approximately $89 billion, I mentioned it before, and withdrew 10 times from the HSF, totaling $17 billion. These are all in TT dollars numbers. They accessed about $89 billion in financing to prop up the government spending because they failed budgets and, of course, the HSF funding. Presently, they're borrowing just to pay salaries and to pay debt. The country is effectively broke. I warn contractors and suppliers, you will not get paid by them for work that they're trying to give out now in this election year. Like the previous budgets, the minister has presented, today's budget statement was filled with a lot of repeated commentary, repeated promises, broken over the years, repeatedly promised, broken. My colleagues, and of course in the debate itself, will go into some more details. But we can talk about this road. What is it? We talked about Misallocated road. Highway to Moruga. First it was they promised a roadway to Moruga, then they promised a highway. I think they're back to promising a highway again, and that has not happened. So many of those projects have been repeated year upon year, and the promises have not been kept. Every budget since taking office, every single year, the minister's projections have been historically wrong on revenue and expenditure, deficit and debt. The minister also historically always bases his budgets on overestimated prices of energy products. This government is stuck on repeat, committing the same mistakes based on the same misinformed and misguided fiscal policies, rehashing the same repeat failed initiatives with the same predictable consequences on the backs of our citizens. There are no medium to long-term plans and measures in this budget that demonstrates that the government can reestablish a stable environment, uphold the rule of law, and foster economic diversification for TNT. In fact, this budget once more endorses the key hallmarks of the Rowley regime for the past 9 years. That is tax, borrow, and spend. Tax, borrow, and spend. That is the hallmark of all the Rowley regime's budgets. For reference, a total of $61.54 billion was approved between budgetary allocation of $59.21 billion in October 2023, plus the supplemental allocation in the midterm review of $2.33 billion for fiscal 2024. Yet, when the minister should be accounting for what he promised last year in the 2023-24 budget statement, the minister came today to list in his achievements for 2024 as having changed bulbs to LED in 1,079 streetlights and about running a paltry 7 kilometers of water lines in 11 projects. The minister is really scraping the bottom of the barrel. The insulting 5% and $2 on minimum wage is an insult to offer to workers 5%. Undoubtedly, some P&M-aligned unions will praise this and accept, but the majority of workers know that the cost of living has increased far more than that, and this additional 1% from the wicked 4% to 5% is an insult. The $2 increase in minimum wage is too small. It will not match the rise in the cost of living in our country. It is purely an election gimmick. $25 an hour, I would have chosen as a realistic point for minimum wage, considering the cost of living at this time. And the minister called some numbers. I don't know, once again, his maths does not math. The maths not mathsing. But it talks about this works down, this new wage, if you work it, is $16 a day. $16 a day more for a 5-day week. When you work that out, the numbers he was quoting, $340. But he's quoting 500 and so on per week. So maths, not maths. And yes, this is for the public sector, yes. The combined increases of transport. This is for CPEP and URP and MTS. Clearly is electioneering. It's not for cost of living. It's not for KFC work, all the others in those low-level incomes. It is electioneering. It is. But we'll find out. I think $16 a day more cannot even buy a loaf of bread. A loaf of bread is more. The one told me 1950, and one says, of course, it is more than $16 a day. The combined increases of transport, taxes, Soon to come high utility rates, land and house prices, rents, security, property taxes, and healthcare costs due to deliberate government policy will continue to erode citizens' purchasing power and, of course, their quality of life. The minister speaks of the additional charge on accounts for increase in wages, but he makes no mention whatsoever of the $4 billion in financing contracts to a relative of one of his ministers who recused himself 101 times from the cabinet. He makes no mention of another minister his family getting $250 million in rent. Makes no mention of $70 million for a palace for the Prime Minister in Tobago. None of these, but is crying about increasing wages for people who need it most. When it comes to VAT refunds, it's the same story. Same old story about VAT refunds. Another fiscal year will pass. The same companies and business chambers that continue pandering and praising all of this government's failed budgets out of fear of victimization, they will continue waiting with their begging bowls for the VAT refunds, their own money. Public utilities. The minister spoke of a total of 38 projects that were completed under the Community Water Improvement Program, which provided support to 16,793 residents at a cost of $47.5 million. However, in the Auditor General's 2024 report, $25 million of these projects could not be accounted for, and still so many of our people, our citizens, are without water. Regarding some other unbelievable claims in public utilities, again, I said the maths is not mathsing. Minister spoke about TNTech Bill Assistance Program. According to the document, over the 4-year period 2020-2024, the TNTech Bill Assistance Program has fully covered the electricity bills of 5,317 persons at a cost of $5.1 million. You know, this works out to be an average payout to each of these 5,317 people of $959.18 for the 4-year period. If we disaggregate this further, if the figures are to be believed, it means that the government paid an average of $20 a month, which fully settled the TNTech bill of all these persons. It is extremely unlikely that any TNTech bill will be $20 per month. Maths not mathsing. 3 WASA Bill Assistance Program, 47,839 customers benefited, he said, from $7.1 million over the same period, same 4-year period. Similarly, this works out to be an average of $148.6 per customer for the 4 years, on average of monthly bill of $3 per customer. This clearly is another case of the maths not mathsing. It is very unlikely that someone have a WASA bill of $3 per month. Let's come to road infrastructure. Again, so many of the same repeated road infrastructure projects from previous budgets. Nothing new, nothing new. Most of their projects are repeated since 2016 and have not been delivered. I mentioned before the Toko Highway is non-existent. The Manzalina Highway is non-existent. I mentioned Maruga, and our MPs here will tell us the same about that Maruga Road. All roads in bad condition. The new projects being mentioned are just Mamagai. Foreign reserves. The central bank reported our net foreign exchange reserves have collapsed by more than 50%, from US $10.5 billion, or 12 months import cover, in September, to $5.5 billion as of July 2024. When we were in office, we had net foreign exchange reserves, as I say, much higher than that. I didn't know why we don't have the number here. I put it in. But we had import cover for 12 months. It is now being reported our import cover is $5.5 billion. 12 months, $5.5 billion, and as at less than 7 months import cover. Okay, so we had US $10.5 billion when we were there. That has gone down to $5.5 billion. And this is US dollars we are talking about. So when they cried, when the first year that we raided the treasury and the treasury was empty, we left them this money, $10.5 billion in foreign reserves. We left money in the HSF. We left billions of dollars in the HSF. All lie, cry, and mama guy. If that's not bad enough, we see today from this budget that forex reserves will continue to fall over the near future unless and until major gas production come in online in when projected 2027. National security. The promise of 2,000 new vehicles for the police service, body cameras, increased staffing, a series of new equipment for Forensic Science Center, begs the question, what has this ministry done with the $60.83 billion it received since 2015? What have they done? Minister also wants to buy 4 new patrol boats and 8 high-speed interceptors. Like they have a thing with boats. From the time they came in, they keep trying to be Ostel boats, whatever. They have 30 boats right now doing what? Parked up. What are you going to buy? 4 new patrol boats, 8 high-speed interceptors. What are they going to cost when you have 30 boats sitting down there parked up for repairs, and they are not fixing them. They're not repairing them at all. If this government could not make improvements regarding the crime situation with $60.83 billion, why would anyone believe that the $6.1 billion allocation today will cause any improvement? Auditor General. For the first time in our nation's history, a budget has been presented discussing the state of our economy, of this massive expenditure against a disturbing backdrop of the unprecedented legal battle between the Auditor General and the government, where approximately $3 billion this government cannot account for in the last year alone. Further, it is the first time that the budget is being presented after the Auditor General's report has issued a public disclaimer in a 2024 report, which is a sign of truly dangerous economic territory. $3 billion can't be accounted for. If ever there was a marker for fiscal instability and improper use of our finances in our nation, it is that. What is happening as well, government has pushed our country into a debt trap. Instead of frontally admitting the truth and seeking help to fix the problems, the minister keeps spending money while generating none, putting generations of citizens in debt. Our children will have to repay the moneylenders for this corruption and mismanagement. And in the meanwhile, they wouldn't be able to afford their own homes or to start and maintain families like previous generations did. There's much more to say. I will say so on Friday. And of course, our MPs will continue. I just want to make a point. MP Mohit pointed out to me this as follows. I think about 10% of our population are on pension. Another 10% are on CDAP, is it? Public assistance and so on, public grants. And there has been no increase whatsoever in any of these. But Senator Davian pointed out to me, they want to spend almost, what's it,
400 million on
400 million to renovate 2 hotels and then move on to privatize.
Privatize Magdalene.
Privatize the Magdalene. Are we getting into this hotel thing now? When our people are suffering, citizens are suffering. They can't put food on their table. This government, their priorities are totally upside down. Nothing for the ordinary poor people in our country and the most vulnerable, but millions and billions to be spent on these vanity projects. And I'll show you on Friday how many vanity projects where the money has gone. Government saying they don't have the money to give you a better wage increase. I had suggested we should have a $25 minimum wage for these public sector groupings. I suggested they should start with at least 10% for the public sector unions. Minister came today to give you a little sweetener. It's election time. He said, okay, we'll give you 4%, we'll give you 5%. What difference is it going to make when the cost of living is as high as it is today? So I end how I started. This government could not improve the country after spending over $530 billion for the past 9 years, and now we'll spend another $60 billion in this year. I say only fools eat a food, fake elites, pseudo intellectuals, and P&M true believers will think that this additional $60 billion will create any improvement. I say expect nothing. All of this is like I told you, a Columbus budget. You come to promise trinkets and mirrors and smoke. Whilst people are suffering in the country. There's an election budget, there's no question about it. I noticed that there was a very interesting point. There was a date that kept coming up. It was January 2025. It was like a magic date. A lot of the things would be happening in January 2025. So maybe the Prime Minister is right, there will be no election this year. Or maybe he's wrong and there will be one. Whichever it's called, whenever he calls it, we are ready. And I have no doubt that the UNC will call and win whenever he calls. The US will win that election whenever called. So I thank you all very much. If you have any questions, I'll be willing to take them.
Mrs. Cassandra, in terms of the decision, the Fiscal decision, any comments on that?
What was the CLICO decision, please? Remind me.
Decision to divest Fiscal.
14.
Good project.
Okay, I'll get back to you on Friday on that. I'll get back to you Friday. Anyone else?
Articulated a response. Perhaps you didn't see the position on Friday as well. Anything on government's announcement that there have been 3 companies that were selected by cabinet for the control panel.
Yeah, I don't believe a word of it. I think it's not what happened previously. They were going to sell it always before an election. Hold on, we're going to sell it. We'll get it done. I don't believe a word of it. That refinery will sit there. It has already turned to a large percentage of scrap iron. So I don't believe it. I don't believe it whatsoever. It's another smoke and mirror and trinket and golden beads and plastic beads.
Hi, Ryan Hamilton, David Trinidad Museum. Just to repeat one of my colleagues' questions as well, if you have any comment on government's decision to divest Fiscal.
I told him I'll get back to him on Friday. Yeah, I'll have to.
Following up.
Hey, hello. It was 5 hours process, so.
Yeah, I know. The minister spoke of tourism resurgence as far as Trinidad and Tobago is concerned. My question to the group here is, do you think that would deter that crime and the level of crime and criminality in Trinidad and particularly in Tobago would that deter tourists and probably put a damper on this supposed resurgence?
Well, first of all, I don't believe it again. I don't believe any of their numbers. They had promised us something called as a National Statistical Institute. Promised in every single budget. It's not in this year's budget, by the way. So coming back to the tourism issue, the resurgence that he's speaking of, I have not seen it. I have not seen that data. Again, I don't believe him. And with the level of crime in the country, I don't think tourism is anywhere near to seeing any re-emergence. There's another thing the minister has done, and he keeps doing it. The minister compares apples and cherries and grapes and oranges. So he will talk about this has happened in 23. Then he jumps to 24, then he goes back to 20. You don't know which, when, what happened. He jumps the date, he cherry picks the dates, he cherry picks the data. He's not consistent with his data. And in that way, he gives a confused picture. When you sit and really analyze it, it's very confusing. So on those tourism numbers, I say I don't believe him. We don't have independent stats data to analyze what he's saying. And given the high level of crime, I can't see that happening, any emergence. And then all these hotels that they want to build, I think all of that just to spend money. Felt good money behind, bad. They're talking about using these scandalous sandals again for some hotel, 5-star. That in this lifetime we will not see. Under them.
During market things there as well. And any part of the budget that your cabinet will be willing to support?
That's a very hard question. It's a very difficult question. Of course, we support any expenditure that will improve the quality of life. But if I were to single out if I single out, I'm hard pressed to give you an answer.
Do you believe any initiatives to improve citizens' life in the budget at all?
Not at all. Peanuts for ordinary people and millions and zillions for big contractors and hotels and whatever. No.
You mentioned it's an election budget, but at the same time you said that the increase like $2 and the 5% for the workers is inadequate. What makes an election budget to you then if the people it's not enough?
Because it sounds on paper, it sounds great. How many thousands working in MTS? How many thousands working in CPEP? How many thousand in URP? Whatever. Yeah, great. Wow. He's giving us $2 more, $16 more a day. That is a goodies. but it is not sufficient for people to have sustain their lives. The food on the table is not sufficient. So it appears on the surface to be good, but when you drill it down, $16 a day, I just cannot buy a loaf of bread. Cost of living.
Sorry, 2025 will be an election year, and the minister, he announced a lot of fiscal measures, including, I think, 210 million for 100 road paving projects throughout the country. Are you concerned with the expenditure of these monies going forward, not just in works, Ministry of Works, but across the board?
I'm not concerned because it's not going to happen. A lot of these infrastructure projects have been promised repeatedly. At a time when the tongue crier, Mr. Rowley, is saying, hey, hold strain, whatever, we're really not going to have any gas in our engines until 2027. I'm not seeing them happening. They haven't happened over the last 9 years, and I think I did call some of them specifically, if you would like me to mention. The San Fernando to Mayaro Freeway never happened. Construction of Wallerfield to Manzanilla. Construction of Port of Spain to Chagaramas. A mass transit system, road between Valencia and Toco. First class road from Princestown to Maruga. And it goes on. A new ferry port in Toco. New container port in Port of Spain. We heard nothing about that. That was a repeated promise.
So lastly, Minister Mbed started by saying in 9 years you were not ever able to match the amount of time that he spoke in Parliament. Today he spoke for 5+ hours. Do you think that on Friday he will be speaking for 5+ hours?
Long on quantity and short on quality. I will not make that decision today. I'll have to assess it. And that is not true to say that I did not match him. Maybe some days we did. Some days I know last day was just a few minutes difference. These people lie, cry, and mama guy, Every one of them is lie, cry, and mama guy. And some people believe them.
Anything you can tell us of your on Friday?
You mean more things?
Yeah.
I've said so much already. There's a lot more we can say. The health sector is in shambles. Health sector is in shambles. Yeah, I'll certainly talk about the health sector, you see. The minister did talk today about improvements for the health sector with equipment and whatever. But we hear these things every year, repeated promises. Look at what has happened. We built a state-of-the-art children's hospital. They stripped it bare. They used the pandemic as a step down to open it. And what happened? 18 children died in the Port of Spain General. 18. That we had all those, what you call it, NICU services at Cova Hospital. Look at how many people died in COVID, The Ministry of Health has become a Ministry of Death. You walk in that hospital, you're not sure if you're coming back walking out. They may have to wheel you out in the mortuary. The health sector is in shambles, and I will talk a little more about it as well. Health sector. I have a labor agenda I'll share with you. We've been meeting with many of the labor unions over the past 2 months, and we've worked out some points of agreement for labor movement, and some more Friday. Anybody else wants to ask anything? So,
one question on
so I promised you on CLICO, I'll get back to you and you.
one question on
Energy.
Well, you have mentioned it before, and the Prime Minister as well as the Minister of Finance, that more projects will be coming online officially in 2027. But are you satisfied with the government's expression of plans to manage the country while we still waiting, while they're making hay what we plan those kind of
Last year he talked about diversification. Almost every year, diversification. Today was what steadfast resolution and prosperity growth or something like pathways. But not one prosperity pathway in front of us. Still, all the eggs are in the oil and gas basket. That's the energy sector that you're speaking about. And do you know our production levels have fallen to the lowest ever. Back to 1960 numbers, and yet still we are so heavily dependent on that sector. So we're getting nowhere fast. I don't know if that answers your question on the energy sector. The projects they are projecting to come on board in 2027. How long we've been hearing about these projects? Not today. the Laura and Manatee Field. What's the other one? Coquina, Dragon Gas, all these, yes, repeat. I have no confidence those things are going to happen in this fiscal year. It took 9 years and have not happened. Why suddenly they will not happen? They say it says 2027. I don't even believe it will happen in 2027, this government. I don't believe it. I do not believe the majority of what was said today. Okay?
And some gives TD6 News.
Oh, sorry.
Alright, so the finance minister talked about over 89,000 property owners paying property tax, totaling about, he said $91 million in revenue. What's your response to the response by the public in terms of paying property tax? People giving in, or is still, as that what do you think about the response?
Fair. There are two things that can happen. It's not just penalties. They can come and pick up your chattels. You know those chattels? Your camera, your chairs, your refrigerator, your stove, your fridge. I said fridge, right? They can pick up your chattels as a first line and sell it. The next line, if you do not pay, is your house. Your house, they'll take your house and sell it. They have a provision, which is again, I'm a guy. They're saying, well, if you cannot pay, your pensioner or your whoever, and you can't pay, you can apply for what? A deferral. What that means, you're a pensioner, you're going to dead just now. I will soon be one, so I don't mean it disrespectfully. If you're a pensioner, you know, your lifespan is. What happens then? When that pensioner applied for the deferral, got the deferral for a few years, or maybe 10 years, or however long they live for, what happens? You, the son, as the person who will inherit, you got to come and pay it. Otherwise, the strain on your chattels, sell it, back to take your house and sell it. So it's a very serious set of penalties and offenses there, and people are scared. We don't know. The minister has told us X amount of persons. We really don't know. We don't have the data anywhere else except from the minister's mouth. And I have come not to believe much of what the minister says. So people will try to pay, and there's another catch in that. The minister came to the parliament, again election year, and said, okay, the property tax, we're going to reduce it from 3% to 2%. But he didn't tell you that in that same order that he created, that he has the power to raise it up to 10% with the stroke of a pen. He doesn't even have to come back to parliament to pass it. He gave himself that power with the stroke of a pen. So there's a lot more. Anselm, we can talk again. And guys?
One more property tax.
Yeah.
One more property tax. I know we get all here, sorry.
We too.
Given the number of people that have paid property tax so far away, and the amount of revenue that has come from property tax so far, is it a surprise to you that there hasn't been much more allocations to things like rural development
That's very good.
and local government and all these other things, because that was the promise that was made by the government, that this property tax would go into that. Are you surprised that there are more allocations for that?
Well, when he was boasting coming down to the end about that and others, about all these taxes they've got and how much revenue they earn and revenue. And it's a very good question. What have you done with all that money? Why have we not given more benefits? I mentioned the pensioners, I mentioned the people on public assistance, all those people who are the lowest levels. Where has the money gone? Friday, I'll tell you where some of it has gone. Where has the money gone that you could not give more benefits to people who are really in need? The local government thing is another serious matter, which I'll address fully on Friday. But he's saying that the money will go to the local government bodies. But it's not going there. So again, it's a lie, cry, mama guy, deny. It's not going in there. Khadija, where is it going? Under the district revenue offices. So it's not going to Superior Regional Corporation or Diego Martin Borough, whichever one. It's not going. It's going to be controlled by Minister of Finance. And the history of this Minister of Finance has been they don't release monies. So they cater for X amount in the budget, and then they come on, they don't release the money. This year, they removed, what was it, about $3 million from local government bodies, They're putting it in something called $43 million. And they're putting it into CPEP. And they're putting it into reforestation projects. What that is, I have to go and handpick. It's votes. Buy votes, buy votes. I just hope, can I share a little story with you before we close? A little bit of humor. Somebody sent me a little video. And it says a politician died and went up to the pearly gates. Met St. Peter. And St. Peter said, what is your profession? He says, I'm a politician. Then St. Peter says, we have a policy. For your profession, you spend 1 day in heaven, and you spend 1 day in hell, and then you choose. So he goes into the heaven through the pearly gates, and the politician thought, well, this is so boring. All they're doing is singing and playing harps and things. This thing too boring. So he's waiting to go down to hell. He goes down the next day to hell. Wow. He sees Satan sitting on a throne. He sees a 5-star hotel. He sees a golf course outside the hotel, swim pool, 5-course meals, fun, fun, fun. He said, wow, this is it. He goes back out of heaven. He said, I've chosen. Tells St. Peter, I have chosen. I will choose hell. Send him back down. When he goes back down, sorry, it is really funny. Fire and brimstone, all the bad things we know about people suffering and bawling and whatever, right? So he goes up. Satan, what happened to all the 5-star hotel and the golf course and the 5-course meals and the swim? What happened to all of that? You know what he tells him? When you came yesterday, we were campaigning. Today, you've made your choice. You voted. On that note, have a good evening all. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Do you know that in 2016, 66 liters of diesel cost $100? Today, under the P&M, you get 20 liters of diesel for $100. The diesel you paid $100 for under the UNC now costs $327 under the P&M, which directly affects the cost of food, transport, and services. Guess who I'm voting for next time?
Everybody now, let's go!